September 1945. The war is over. Across Britain, air raid sirens that once screamed through the night are silent. Searchlights no longer claw at the sky. Radar stations shut down. And on airfields from Scotland to the Mediterranean, one of the most iconic aircraft in history sits motionless. The Supermarine Spitfire. For 5 years, it had been Britain's shield. Its silhouette became a national symbol. Its pilots became legends. It had fought from the Battle of Britain to the skies over Normandy, Italy, and Germany itself. Now, it is no longer needed. Row after row of Spitfires stand parked wingtip to wingtip on cracked concrete and grass airstrips. Some are freshly painted. Others are scarred by flak, patched with hurried repairs, their logbooks thick with combat hours. They all share the same fate. Uncertainty. At the height of the war, Britain had built more than 20,000 Spitfires. Entire factories had run around the clock. Castle Bromwich alone produced aircraft at a rate unimaginable before 1939. Southampton, once the heart of Supermarine, had been bombed, rebuilt, and bombed again, yet production never stopped. But in September 1945, reality arrives all at once. The Royal Air Force does not need 20,000 fighters. It barely needs a fraction of them. Within weeks of Japan's surrender, squadrons begin to disappear from the RAF order of battle. Pilots are demobilized and sent home. Ground crews are reassigned or released. Airfields that once launched interceptors in minutes now sit quiet under grey skies. The scale of the surplus is staggering. More than 5,000 Spitfires remain operational or in storage across Britain alone. New variants, Marks 9, 14, and 18, are still arriving from factories even as cancellation notices are issued. Aircraft that have never fired their guns, never crossed hostile airspace, are parked and forgotten. Production lines that ran day and night for half a decade shut down almost overnight. The men and women who built Britain's most famous fighter now face unemployment. At maintenance units across the country, Spitfires are packed tightly together. At places like Kemble, Hawarden, and Big Gin Hill, the aircraft are arranged in endless rows, their propellers tied down, their cockpits sealed. Some have flown hundreds of combat missions. Others have barely flown at all. And every single one costs money to keep. Fuel, inspections, hangars, guards, paperwork. Britain, exhausted by war, cannot afford sentiment. The country is broke. Cities lie in ruins. Rationing continues. Steel, aluminum, and labor are desperately needed for reconstruction. Military planners confront a brutal question. What do you do with an icon when the war is over? The answer comes quickly and coldly. By late 1945, the British government decides that most Spitfires will be scrapped. Not mothballed. Not preserved. Destroyed. Disposal operations begin quietly, without ceremony. At airfields like Cosford and Shawbury, ground crews begin stripping aircraft of anything reusable. Merlin engines are removed. Radios, guns, instruments, wiring looms, anything of value is salvaged. What remains is the airframe. And the airframe is treated as raw material. Spitfires are dragged by tractors to cutting areas. Some are crushed. Others are sliced apart with torches. Wings are stacked like firewood. Fuselages are bulldozed into piles. The aluminum is melted down and reused for civilian manufacturing. Pots, pans, building materials, machinery. Britain needs metal more than memories. Some scenes are almost unbelievable. Brand new Spitfire Mark 14s, among the most advanced piston fighters ever built, are driven into pits and buried without ever flying operational missions. At coastal airfields, aircraft are loaded onto barges and towed out to sea. Then pushed overboard. Thousands of fighters vanish beneath the waves. Veterans watch in disbelief. Men who had trusted the Spitfire with their lives stand behind fences as the aircraft they loved are reduced to scrap. Letters appear in newspapers condemning the destruction. Some argue these machines should be preserved for history. The government does not budge. Storage costs money. Emotion does not rebuild cities. And so, within months, Britain's greatest wartime aircraft disappears from its own soil. But not all Spitfires die that way. A small number are kept for training purposes. At RAF technical schools, stripped airframes become instructional tools. Apprentices practice engine changes, hydraulic tests, and structural repairs on real fighters, though these aircraft will never fly again. Others become static displays. Gate Guardians. Painted in squadron colors, mounted on poles or concrete plinths, they stand at the entrances of airfields. For years, they face the weather, slowly deteriorating under rain, frost, and neglect. Some will later be rescued by museums. Many will not. A few Spitfires take a stranger path. Stripped of weapons and military equipment, modified for speed, they enter the post-war air racing scene. Painted in bright civilian colors, they thunder around pylons, chasing trophies instead of enemy fighters. Crowds gather. But these aircraft represent only a tiny fraction of the fleet. Most Spitfires never leave the ground again after 1945. While Britain scraps thousands at home, it sells hundreds more overseas. Foreign air forces see opportunity where Britain sees burden. Export deals bring in desperately needed foreign currency and give the Spitfire a second life under new flags. India becomes the largest customer. Newly independent in 1947, the Indian Air Force acquires hundreds of Spitfire Mark 17s. They patrol borders, train pilots, and form the backbone of Indian fighter strength until jet aircraft arrive. Some continue flying into the early 1950s, grounded only when spare parts finally run out. Elsewhere, Spitfires spread across the world. Egypt, Greece, Turkey, Syria, all operate the aircraft in the chaotic post-war years. In 1948, during the Arab-Israeli War, Spitfires fight again in combat. In one of history's ironies, Spitfires face Spitfires in Middle Eastern skies. Southern Rhodesia uses them for training. South Africa flies them briefly before moving to jets. Burma acquires a small batch to establish its air force. France keeps Spitfires longer than most. French pilots fly Mark 9s into the 1950s, using them for reconnaissance and training. When they are finally retired, a few slip into private ownership, among the first civilian-owned Spitfires in history. But time catches up. Maintenance grows difficult. Parts become scarce. Jet aircraft dominate the skies. One by one, Spitfires are grounded, scrapped, or abandoned. By 1954, the last RAF Spitfire squadron disbands. The era ends quietly. What was once the backbone of fighter command becomes obsolete in less than a decade. Most people assume the story is over. They are wrong. In the 1960s and 1970s, something unexpected happens. Interest returns. Former pilots, aviation enthusiasts, and historians begin asking uncomfortable questions. Where did all the Spitfires go? The answers are shocking. Airframes are discovered in barns, hidden behind hay bales. Wrecks are found in scrapyards, misidentified or forgotten. Some lie abandoned at remote airfields overseas. Others are buried, literally, in fields where they were dumped decades earlier. The first restorations are not grand projects. They are acts of obsession. Individuals buy derelict Spitfires for a few £100s, sometimes little more than a corroded fuselage and bent wings. They work in garages, sheds, and small workshops, rebuilding aircraft piece by piece. Years pass. Parts are hunted down across continents. Merlin engines are rebuilt by hand. Instruments are sourced from scrap bins and museum basements. One of the most famous discoveries comes from a peat bog in Ireland. A Spitfire that crashed during the war sank into soft ground and vanished. Decades later, it is excavated, remarkably preserved by the oxygen-poor environment. It is eventually restored to flying condition. Similar recoveries follow. From Norwegian fjords. From French forests. From desert airstrips and forgotten training fields. Museums take notice. The Imperial War Museum. The RAF Museum. Private collectors. They begin competing for surviving aircraft. Prices rise. By the 1980s, a complete Spitfire airframe is worth tens of thousands of pounds. By the 2000s, hundreds of thousands. Today, a fully restored, airworthy Spitfire can sell for over £3 million. The same aircraft once sold as scrap by weight. The transformation is complete. From surplus junk to priceless artifact. In the modern era, only around 60 Spitfires remain airworthy worldwide. They fly at airshows across Britain, Europe, and North America. Crowds fall silent as Merlin engines start. The sound is unmistakable, deep, mechanical, alive. Organizations and private owners dedicate enormous resources to keeping them flying. Restoration becomes a specialized industry. Engineers spend tens of thousands of hours on each aircraft, fabricating parts to exact wartime specifications. Some flying Spitfires are composites, built from pieces of several wrecks combined into a single machine. Every rivet matters. Every panel tells a story. And still, rumors persist. Of buried Spitfires beneath former RAF stations. Of forgotten airframes in remote corners of the world. Each discovery adds another chapter to the aircraft's unlikely afterlife. What survives today is only a fraction of what once existed. Thousands are gone forever. Scrapped. Burned. Dumped at sea. The Spitfire did not fade away gradually. It was erased, quickly, efficiently, and without mercy. And yet, against all odds, it returned. Not as a weapon, but as a memory made real. A reminder that even the most celebrated machines can be discarded when they outlive their purpose, and that sometimes, history survives only because a few people refuse to let it disappear.